climate change is not being worsened principally because of the drug war, of course, but drug war is making it far worse. And I think most people who are taking and consuming drugs, and even arguing it should be legalized and regulated, I would argue many of them have no idea of the impacts on climate change that actually their consumption is having. And I think it's important that that part of the debate is injected into it much more than it has been so far. So my name's Antony Loewenstein. I'm an independent journalist, author and filmmaker. I've written for The New York Times, The Guardian, many others, and a number of books. My most recent book is called Pills, Powder and Smoke: Inside the Bloody War on Drugs, which is a multi-year investigation around the world of both what the drug war looks like in the 21st century, from Honduras to West Africa to the Philippines, and also what it could be and how it could end, and why legalization and regulation of drugs is the only sane, reasonable outcome, and hope more people get on board with that soon.
As global health students, we're obviously interested in planetary health, and especially in the run-up to COP, we're sort of interested in exploring all the different barriers to climate change action. I wondered if you could just give us a bit of an introduction in your experience, and in particular, the role that the drug war is playing in preventing any change from happening.
I think so often when we talk about the drug war, when I say we, I get the media, for the last, frankly, half century, I would say that in the majority of cases, with some exceptions, climate change never is talked about. It's not mentioned, it's not assessed, it's not seen as part of the conversation, it's not seen as relevant, it's somehow seen as an important issue, but a separate one. And that's clearly not true. But the truth is that the environmental costs of the current cocaine industry is brutal. We're talking about mass deforestation in Colombia, which has 80% of the world's cocaine production. In Honduras, they don't produce very much cocaine. It's mostly a transit country. But huge parts of the country that are seen as the transit areas have had mass deforestation as well.
You mentioned the media just then very briefly. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the role that they play in kind of framing the drug war.
I think in general, much of the media coverage, when I say the media, I'm talking mostly about the Western media, has been an unbelievably negative force in how we view drugs and the drug war, and I would argue climate change. When it comes to the drug war, for decades, drug users were demonized. They're deemed as expendable. Certain drug users are deemed as not worthy of living. It's justified to send them to prison. And obviously the journalists themselves are not doing the actual imprisoning, but they are creating a narrative and an environment and a demonization that allows the political class to treat people as garbage. The impact of that, certain politicians may be potentially interested in opening up drug policy, either legalization, decriminalization, whatever it may be. But I heard this constantly: oh, we're scared of what the Daily Mail's going to say tomorrow. So I guess my point in saying all this is that the media plays a vital role in humanizing the drug war. I don't mean to make it more acceptable. I mean to try to challenge it and to end it.
If in this ideal world we did legalize all drugs, can you explain a little bit about how that might influence the ability for climate action and climate change policy?
I do think what is positive about more and more countries legalizing a lot of drugs and regulating them is that you do two major things. You potentially remove the vast bulk of the criminal element of the drug trade, which is what causes so much of the misery. And secondly, you remove, for example, in Colombia, the necessity to have massive land clearing, which is what is used to grow coca, which is obviously what turns into cocaine. I would like to think that on the agenda of serious action on climate change, there is an equally important conversation about legalizing and regulating drugs, the impact that would have on reducing the most negative effects of climate change. But what happens to all the Colombians who are producing the drugs now? Where is the support for them? Where is the reparations? I mean, to me, reparations are so key in the drug war, that people who have suffered because of it for decades need to be compensated for their loss, for their pain, for their suffering. Yeah, I'll end on this point. One of the things I'm trying to make people more aware of is we spend so much time in the West now, in a good way, thinking more ethically about how we live our lives. And that's good, ethical living. But there's not really ethical drug taking. Why not? I mean, a lot of people do drugs, and why shouldn't there be? And why couldn't there be that the idea of thinking more about where is your food coming from? Where is your clothes coming from? Where are your drugs coming from? Who are producing it for you? How's it getting to you? Who are you buying it off? Who's being supported in doing that? Who's negatively being impacted by your choices? And I think we think more about that when it comes to food and clothing and living, but not so much with drugs. And I think that could change. And yeah, so if you agree with me, tell other people.